welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and I am coming to you at 11:38 p.m. Eastern Time, Columbus, Ohio. Ready to talk all things Week 6 as we do every Sunday night after the slate of action wraps up. So 12 great games from today. I want to break down each and every one of them, give you some of the key fantasy football workload related stuff, also some cool stats I've managed to dig up throughout the afternoon. And then finally, firstly, not finally, we're going to go over some of the key injuries from the day and, what impact that could have moving forward. Make sure you tune in to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast throughout the week. Come to you every week with Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday episodes. Appreciate all you listeners out there. And without further ado, let's get into the slate. So a lot of key injuries here. Raheem Mostert is the one that happened Sunday night, ankle injury. They gave him a chance to come back out in the second half, but he pretty much went in for a play and immediately came back out, was ruled out. Not looking good. And because of that, we saw it wasn't just McKinnon. It was actually JaMycal Hasty getting a lot of run as well. That was more because Jeff Wilson wasn't active because of a calf injury originally. So, if Mostert remains out, I expect McKinnon to be a lead guy, but Wilson would be more of the 1B, probably more of a 2 guy. It was just an interesting situation. When Mostert was healthy last week, McKinnon and Wilson were actually working side by side. But when Mostert was out before, McKinnon was the lead back. So McKinnon's definitely the guy we want for Fantasyland, but Wilson could potentially give us some value if he's healthy as well. Baker Mayfield with a ribs injury that he played through. Stefanski already came out and said he's going to start as long as he's healthy. Some wonder if it was a little bit of a quarterback controversy with Case Keenum coming in before the fourth quarter, but it was more or less the Browns kind of put up the white flag at that point. They just were not able to move the ball. Ravens running back Mark Ingram suffered an ankle injury. Ravens have a week 7 bye, but some to monitor for J.K. Dobbins and also Gus Edwards. Joe Mixon had a foot injury. He came back in the second half, but I just wonder if he was still kind of limited with it. He played 20 second half snaps, and Giovanni Bernard was up right there at 19. Doesn't seem like something that'll keep him out for any sort of game time or anything like that, but some to monitor with the practice participation. If this takes Mixon from 80% snaps to 50%, not ideal. Devontae Parker suffered a groin injury, week 7 bye though, hopefully has time to get right. Darius Slayton suffered a foot injury. We'll see how serious that is. They got the Eagles next. Darius Slay a little bit banged up himself. Otherwise, if Sterling Shepard remains out, we can keep going back to well with Slayton. Zach Ertz suffered a foot or ankle injury. They're kind of calling it both. He's going to have an MRI on Monday. Apparently, the Miles Sanders injury is a little bit more concerning, a knee that he twisted up after a long run. So he's also getting an MRI. Keep an eye on those guys. Obviously, Boston Scott is going to be the guy if Sanders is out. He really dominated touches over Corey Clement in this game, even though earlier in the year when Sanders was out, we saw them split things up. I do think Scott is pretty clearly the guy to own. And if Ertz is out and Goddard's out, man, I'd have to check if they still have Joshua Perkins to be that number 3 tight end. But at this point, I think we need to focus on the more proven pass catchers in this offense, Travis Fulgham and Greg Ward. Did not think I'd be saying that about the Eagles here in week 7, but that's the situation we're in. Tyler Eifert suffered a neck injury, re-aggravated it during the game, so he's not an option we're looking at. We're not even going to look at James O'Shaughnessy or anyone else. More of just a hat tip, if you will, to Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark and those remaining guys. Jonnu Smith suffered an ankle injury. That's why Anthony Ferguson had such a big day. They do use a lot of 2 tight end stuff, but Smith wasn't out there as much as he normally is. Steelers up next week. If we don't know if Smith's going to be out there at 100% snaps, it might be a time to look elsewhere if you have the options at the tight end position, being Ferguson first and foremost, even though obviously the matchup doesn't really benefit either of them. Kareem Hunt suffered a shoulder injury early in the game. He played through it. Kind of just something to keep an eye on. We did see them in that Cowboys game, use De'Aaron Johnson more because Kareem Hunt was banged up. So if he goes into next week with a questionable tag or something, keep that in mind when, assessing his ceiling. Also, just a few non-skill position injuries. Even though we're just always a fantasy football land, obviously we care about all those other real-life players too. But Jay Glazer reports that the Titans fear left tackle Taylor Lewan suffered a torn ACL. Obviously, big news for Derrick Henry and gang. The Packers left tackle David Bakhtiari suffered a chest injury. was hurt and did not return. If you watch that Aaron Rodgers performance, big reason why, they weren't able to get anything going was that offensive line giving up way more pressure than usual. He was only the second, he was the second least pressure quarterback going into the game. Not sure if it'll still be that way once the total week 6 stats roll in. And then finally, Steelers linebacker Devin Bush suffered a torn ACL and was done for the season. This is big. I mean, we saw the Steelers when they lost Ryan Shazier a few years ago really struggle for a while to replace, that sideline to sideline middle linebacker. And even though Devin Bush kind kind of struggled to be that guy early on in his rookie year, was really coming into his own in 2020. Hopefully he has a full recovery. And, Steelers will be okay. They still have talent everywhere, all over that defense, but obviously not ideal for a unit that is kind of carrying this team at the moment. So those are the injuries. Make sure you tune in to the episode of this podcast. It'll be out Tuesday. I go over the Monday night games and then specifically touch on the top waiver wire targets. So without further ado, we will get into breaking down the 12 Week 6 matchups from Sunday. All right, Steelers beat the Browns 38-7. Really wasn't close. We're still seeing Roethlisberger not have the same sort of volume and not throwing deep. He did have a lovely deep ball to Chase Claypool where they picked up 36 yards down the sideline. He almost scored. Also, James Washington had a 28-yard catch where he had a nice double move and got downfield. But other than that, no Steelers player had a catch longer than 7 yards. So, we've been talking about this in articles, but Roethlisberger really just isn't the same sort of gunslinger, high average target depth guy this year. Obviously, great real life results, and they need him to be healthy. So, it makes sense. But in fantasy land, even in these home matchups where we're expecting the Steelers to be good, he's not really going to be more than an upside QB2 at best moving forward. On the other side of the ball, Baker Mayfield looking all sorts of erratic. It's almost rough. And, for him to only go 10 of 18, 119 yards, touchdown, 2 picks, 4 sacks, just nothing good was happening in this game. And you saw Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry getting open at times and having opportunities, but just not enough volume. And it was surprising in a game that did feature nothing but negative game script for the Browns. Like they finally had to kind of put something on Baker's plate. He was not able to come through. We've talked about on this podcast how, Baker, despite the 4-1 start the Browns had, posting career worst numbers in, PFF grade and most of his efficiency metrics. So, when the run game isn't able to run up 300 yards like they did on the Cowboys, or at the very least control the game like they have most of the season, it's going to be problematic for Baker because right now he's, a low volume quarterback that's also displaying low end efficiency. So until one of those things turns around, this passing game is going to continue to be erratic all the way around. Looking at some of the snap counts from the backfield, Steelers, James Conner continuing to lead the way, 66% snaps, 20 carries, 1 target. Benny Snell also involved with 23% snaps, 6 carries and 1 target. Not all that mop-up time. Conner is someone I wouldn't be against selling high on because he's healthy right now. He's putting up the RB1 production that we know he can put up when he's healthy. And if people are finally accepting this and you can ship him off for someone that we feel a little bit better about continuing to be this sort of healthy, efficient back come November, December, I wouldn't be against it. Kind of same rationale we talked about James Robinson a few weeks ago where, yes, having one of these guys on your team that's going to be getting 15, 20 plus touches per week, that's valuable. But we also need to realize, every week that the wheels stay on James Conner's wagon is another week that we're, more or less kind of getting lucky with it. So I would not hate, if someone's willing to treat him as this top 10, top 12 back he is when healthy, if you can get, a high-end wide receiver 1 in return that you feel a little bit better about their, full season progression, I don't hate that move. With the Browns, Kareem Hunt, 52% snaps, 13 carries, 3 targets. Still, though, this was just more blowout induced. Again, Baker got pulled and the third quarter and just wasn't even out there in the fourth. Neither was Odell Beckham or Kareem Hunt. So we saw Dontrell Hilliard soak up a lot of the fourth quarter action, same with Dearness Johnson. If we get just a regular neutral game script without Nick Chubb, I expect to see Kareem Hunt in that 70 to 80% snap range, getting 20 plus touches. He's too good not to get that sort of work. Going to continue to treat him as a high-end RB1 in Fantasyland moving forward. With the receivers, I took an L on my Odell Beckham chopper. I'm going to open up the, I think, ownership a little more because literally there wasn't a single player that met my criteria in the 1 p.m., 4 p.m. slate, and that's under 5% projected ownership. And, obviously can't be a top 5 price player at the position as well. So guys like Derrick Henry, were too expensive. And even guys like Justin Jefferson and DeAndre Swift were a little bit too chalky, even though, again, I don't think they were exactly, popping off at anyone. So we'll see. I don't want to keep lashing on about my failures, but, obviously not a great game from OBJ, 2 catches, 25 yards. Jarvis Landry, only 3 catches, 40 yards. Austin Hooper, 5 catches for 52 scoreless yards himself. Rashard Higgins caught the only touchdown from the group. Look, this is life in this Browns offense, and we've seen better days, but it's a run first unit like the Vikings. The problem is Mayfield just hasn't been as efficient of a quarterback as Kirk Cousins has been in his limited chances. And I know Cousins didn't have a good game today himself either, but if you notice, Jefferson and Thielen still putting up those numbers. When Cousins needs to come from behind and pass, he's able to do it. Now, okay, this was the Steelers' worst case matchup. Again, better days are going to be ahead, but these are the floors for these receivers with Mayfield under center in this run first offense. On the Steelers side of the ball, Chase Claypool coming back, 4 catches, 74 yards on 4 targets. We actually saw James Washington get more of the pass game looks with 7, and he had a 68 yards and a touchdown on his own. But, Claypool, they love this guy. And this is, why he was a number 1 recommended waiver wire pickup this week. It wasn't just some fluky week 5 performance where, he got touchdowns and busting coverages. No, they've been designing stuff for him inside the 10-yard line all season. They also use him as their deep ball threat. And we saw him score, not on a receiving play today, but actually on a rush from inside the 5-yard line. So they just want to get the ball in his hands. He's their downfield receiver, and it is a very fantasy friendly role. So we got to get really used to treating Claypool as a top 20 weekly receiver, regardless of if Deontay Johnson with that back injury is back anytime soon. Juju Smith-Schuster only caught 2 of 4 targets for 6 yards all year. I mean, this guy just doesn't look fully healthy, and we see him continuously pop up on the injury report with the knee injury. I do think that has the most to do with it. I mean, even his touchdowns this year, he just didn't look like he's been moving right. And for someone that really made a lot of his living in those Antonio Brown years with his ability after the catch, we need him to be closer to 100%. I mean, right now, it's one of those situations where it's like AJ Green, where, hey, maybe Juju's able, to put it together. AJ Green had a good day himself, but, he's not someone I'm going to be prioritizing in the starting lineups at all. I did not have him in my top 30 wide receivers this week, and I do not think he will be moving forward. Our PFF Lilly matchup stat is in regards to Odell Beckham. OBJ has fewer than 100 receiving yards in 15 consecutive games right now. He never went more than 5 games without hitting triple digits while with the Giants. So, I was one of many clowns in the 2018 offseason going into 2019, talking about how great OBJ and Baker were going to be. But, I'm standing here with a hat in hand, apologizing to you, Eli Manning. I'm sure you're listening, but good stuff, Eli, enabling OBJ for those years. Hopefully Baker can get him on track soon. Titans defeated the Texans 42-36. Maybe the best game of the entire day. Just seeing Watson and Tannehill go back and forth repeatedly throughout this one. I mean, second half, Derrick Henry had a 94-yard touchdown run, and then Watson came right back with a bomb to Will Fuller, and Tannehill was trying to go again. I mean, truly back and forth down to the wire. Really fun one. But first on Tannehill. I mean, this guy just keeps on balling out. I mean, the touchdowns were a mix of just overall patience, going through his reads, like the one he got to Ferkser or 3rd or 4th guy. And then, I mean, it's the final one to A.J. Brown to force overtime, just a fade route where he put it right on the money. So at this point, I mean, Tannehill, he needs to be in the top 10 QB discussion. That's exactly what he's been. I don't want to give away the PFF Lilly stat, but, top 10 might even be a little low considering the numbers he's put up over the past 2 seasons. And then with Deshaun Watson, 235 yards, 4 touchdowns. Tannehill, by the way, had 364 yards and 4 touchdowns. So 8 passing scores in this game. Got to see also 26 rushing yards from Watson. So he's got a little bit better floor. We talked about last week how Watson has kind of had a career low rushing yards per game going into this one, but looking awesome. I mean, he got forced into comeback mode a little bit early with the Titans jumping up to a multi-score lead. But, whether it was Fuller, Darren Fells, Brandon Cooks, Watson just continuously makes plays. He's putting the ball where he needs to. Only took 2 sacks in this game. He kind of gets in trouble when he's going a little bit too heavy off script, but didn't see that one here. I still like to see, Duke and David Johnson get a little more involved as receivers because they have that in their skill set. But when Watson's cooking with all these receivers running around, how can you blame him? He is averaging now career high marks in yards per attempt, PFF passing grade, and adjusted completion percentage, even though DeAndre Hopkins is not there. I mean, I think it's similar to kind of the Christian McCaffrey thing with the Panthers and Mike Davis still doing well. Obviously, any offense in the league is better with DeAndre Hopkins in it, but when the defenses don't really have the same type of person to key on, and you don't have an offense forcing the ball to Hopkins the way Houston did and the way Carolina did with McCaffrey. And we're talking like egregious 190 target totals for Hopkins, and McCaffrey was setting running back records. So when you're not doing that quite as much, and it's not like those offenses were bad doing that to Hopkins, but it's just not surprising to an extent when you add more solid receivers in the offense, even if none of them are quite as good as Hopkins. Watson's better to spread the ball around, surprise defenses a little bit more on a play-by-play basis. With the backfields, this was all Derrick Henry's game. 212 yards on the ground, 2 scores. I mean, the 94-yard run was obviously amazing, the way he can pull away at his size, but he had some other impressive runs throughout the game where just showing absurd shiftiness and kind of underrated ability to make dudes miss for a man his size. Also had a 53-yard catch in overtime to help set up his own touchdown where they just put him in the Wildcat on 3rd and goal. Put the ball in your best player's hand and let him go make a play, right? And that's what the Titans did with Derrick Henry. Good to see it. And also shout out Jeremy McNichols, 5 carries, 51 yards. I mean, this Texans defense came into the game averaging, they just allowed as a raw total more yards before contact than any other rush defense in the league, continuing to go back the well against them with running backs in fantasy land. On the Texans side of the ball, David Johnson, dominant 81% snap rate. Duke was just at 24%. David had 19 carries, 57 yards in his score. Got stopped at the 1-yard line in 2 other drives. Like, he got stopped in 1 drive and he scored, but then 2 other entire drives, they ended up having to find a different way to the end zone. So David, I called him the prime kind of sell just trade candidate to go try to get a couple weeks ago. He's been producing. He's been finding the end zone. It just hasn't been the type of explosive performances we want. It's a guy that's going to be out there for 20 touches a game. He's going to get you 20 touches a game, 80% snaps more weeks than not. The problem is it doesn't look like the RB1 ceiling is in there because Watson just hasn't really picked up the pass game involvement to these guys, and particularly with Duke Johnson shaving away some targets himself. I think we just have to accept that David Johnson is a good, not great RB option, but he'll still settle in that top, 15, 16 backs more weeks than not. So, again, not the dream we were hoping for, but he's pretty much producing where he was drafted. So hardly someone that's killing your fantasy team right now. With the receivers, Will Fuller week is every single week except week 2, apparently. 6 catches, 123 yards, and a touchdown. The long one was a 53-yard play. A little bit busted coverage, but I mean, you know what? When you're trying to deal with a guy like Fuller and that speed all the time, that's going to happen. He puts a lot of pressure on every defense he comes up against. He needs to be in weekly starting lineups regardless of the matchup. Darren Fells, without Jordan Akins in the fold, caught 6 passes for 85 yards in a score. Fells is so slow, but he goes out there and he still kind of has some good yak ability anyway, and Watson loves him in the red zone. So as long as Akins is out, we can truly treat Fells as a borderline tight end 1. Brandon Cooks caught all 9 of his targets for 68 yards in a score. Cobb also had a touchdown. I mean, look, it's Will Fuller first and foremost in this offense, but anyone attached to Deshaun Watson when they're cooking in a shootout like this is going to have value. We can kind of comfortably rank Cooks as more of a boomer bust wide receiver 3, sneaking towards the top 30 weekly option as long as he keeps up this sort of production. Titans side of things, I mentioned this earlier with Jonnu Smith and the injury, but yeah, Anthony Ferguson season, everybody caught 8 of 9 targets for 113 yards and a score. Ferguson is someone that, in the DFS world, we look at a lot on these kind of primetime slates as an option, but I don't think as long as Jonnu's going to be out there, he's going to see this sort of consistent target share. This was a game where Tannehill threw the ball 41 times. We usually don't see that, but, it is good to know that if Jonnu does miss time, we can actually expect a legit ceiling from Ferguson in this offense. Adam Humphries had 6 catches for 64 yards and a score without Corey Davis in the picture, but man of the hour was A.J. Brown, caught 5 of 7 targets for 56 yards and 2 touchdowns. First one was, just kind of an extended play, got a little crosser from inside the 10-yard line. The second one was that aforementioned nice fade from from Tannehill. They want to get A.J. Brown the ball when it matters. I mean, week 1 when he was out there, they were throwing him a fade with the game on the line, just weren't quite able to hook up. And then obviously on that Tuesday night game against the Bills, even with him playing at less than 100%, they were feeding them early and often. So still doesn't look 100%. I mean, this is a guy that, again, I keep saying it, shattered the PFF database in yards after catch per reception last year. Hasn't quite been that same guy yet this season, but the fact he's still putting up these sort of numbers as more of a, possession receiver than we've seen in the past is a good sign for his fantasy upside moving forward. I've been saying AJB wide receiver 1 season since the offseason, and we are at that point. It's great to see, and good thing that knee bruise didn't come back to be too shoddy for his rest of the season projection. All right, PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. So mention this about Tannehill, but truly, guys, top 5. If I think he's a top 5 quarterback right now, I don't know what else to call him, because since 2019, his PFF passing grade is 93.3. That's number 2 behind only Russell Wilson among 48 qualified quarterbacks. His average of 8.9 yards per attempt is number 1. His 77.9% adjusted completion rate, which just takes into account kind of throwaways and stuff like that, number 9. His QB rating, number 1. And his average target depth is tied for 6th at 9.4 yards. He's not dinking and dunking down the field. It's not a situation where the scheme is just allowing everyone to flourish. I mean, look, having Derrick Henry, Jonnu Smith, A.J. Brown, these just monsters throw the ball to obviously helps, but there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Tannehill is playing at a top 5 level right now. And in fantasy land, okay, top 5, I get it with some of the issues with volume we see more weeks than not, but just efficiency wise, we need to put some respect on the artist known as Tannehill. Adam Gase is no longer pulling him down, and it is fantastic to see the results in motion. Next matchup, we had the Colts defeating the Bengals 31-27. Game that the Bengals rushed out to a 21-0 lead, kind of took away the chances for Jonathan Taylor to rack up a bunch of touches in this one. But you know what? Credit to Phillip Rivers coming back. A lot of people were almost calling for Jacoby Brissett after his performance last week. Ended up throwing for 371 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Could have had an even bigger game. I mean, he missed Marcus Johnson on a deep potential 50-plus yard dagger touchdown. But you know what? The arm looked good. And even if the deep ball's fluttering a little bit more than usual, when they are inside, it seems like things go a little bit better for him at this point in his career. And, without a ton of weapons out there, it was good to see guys like Marcus Johnson and Trey Burton, in addition to Zach Pascal, making some good plays. So I do think Rivers is still their best option under center over Jacoby Brissett. Even if the arm strength, thing isn't really comparable at this point in Rivers' career, he's obviously still setting him up and, the best play based on what the defense is giving him more times than not. Other side of the ball, Joe Burrow, 313 yards passing, no touchdowns, did sneak one in from the 1-yard line, 1 pick. Hooked up with T. Higgins for a 67-yard catch. It goes in the book as a 67-yard catch, a little bit of a blown coverage, and Burrow just kind of lofting the ball over there. So hit him in stride. The arm strength thing, it is notable where he's not exactly showing the same sort of zip as everyone else out there. But man, if he knows what coverage is coming and he's able to kind of have the time to put the ball where he wants it to go, usually it is going right there. So situation going in this game where we were really high on Burrow because the Colts weren't able to put up a bunch of pressure going in this matchup. I think they were 25th in pressure rate. Burrow was able to come in on that pretty well. Would have liked to see some scoring in there, but when Mixon and Giovanni Bernard are taking touchdowns inside the 10-yard line, that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes with that. With this backfield, Joe Mixon again suffered that foot injury, so I think that influenced these snaps a little bit, but 53% snaps, 18 carries, 3 targets. We saw Gio Bernard get 48% snaps, 8 carries and 3 targets. The 8 carries is the part that's kind of surprising. Normally we'd expect that to be under 3. So more weeks than not moving forward, I think we'll see Mixon get back to his normal pace. Right now he leads the league in combined carries and targets out of all running backs. So, people, it's one of these things where we always want more and more touches for Mixon, but truly he is getting about the heftiest workload we could ask for right now. Other side of the ball, Jordan Wilkins continued to be just out of the picture. He only had 1 carry on the game. Jonathan Taylor, 58% snaps, 12 carries for 60 yards, and he had 4 targets where he was able to convert those into 4 catches for 55 yards. So, 115 total yards, wasn't able to find the end zone. Freaking Trey Burton had a wildcat snap, decided to keep it himself instead of giving it to Jonathan Taylor, and he scored and also scored a receiving touchdown. So, credit to you on your credit to Trey Burton on his 2 touchdowns, but us bitter Jonathan Taylor fantasy managers over here would have appreciated that goal line carry. But it was good to see Jonathan Taylor run a little bit better. I do think, the idea that he could be a league winner down the stretch, because he is right now the undisputed RB1 in this Colts offense, that we're going to see better days from this run game. And the receiving floor he's demonstrated is way better than anything we expected. Jonathan Taylor, if you can get him as a buy low candidate, which I probably not. I think people kind of realize what's happening, and he's not exactly someone that's been not giving you points to this point. But if you can find someone that's really frustrated, maybe give, a boom or bust wide receiver that's been doing good for a couple weeks, and you're able to pry away Jonathan Taylor, I love that idea. With these receivers, T. Higgins, game high, 125 yards, caught 6 of 8 targets. He's looking good out there, showing all the kind of chemistry with Burrow that you would hope to see from a pair of rookies. We still saw A.J. Green get a team high 11 targets, 8 catches for 96 yards. Tyler Boyd, 5 catches for 54 yards on 8 targets. Nobody else had more than 3 targets. It's still crowded at the top with Higgins, Green, and Boyd, but nobody else is involved in that, kind of top 3. And we got Burrow slinging the ball around more than just about anybody these days. So, it's going to be a situation where we don't really know who's going to go off any given week. But, each of Higgins, Boyd, and to a little bit lesser extent Green, I'm still not quite buying this resurgence just yet. But I think each of these guys can be treated as upside wide receiver 3s more weeks than not. T.Y. Hilton experience suffered a really rough one today. 1 catch for 11 yards on 5 targets. He did have a touchdown nullified by a kind of a iffy illegal formation penalty. I think a guy just wasn't on the line of scrimmage or something like that, but not good. It's at the point where, we expect him to go off at some point because it's T.Y. Hilton, but, when we got Marcus Johnson going for 5 catches, 108 yards, Zach Pascal, 4 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown, and then all these tight ends and running backs stealing catches and targets alike. And it's just a situation where Hilton, he wasn't in my top 30 wide receivers receivers this week, not going to be there next week. I still think he is the Colts number one, and at some point we're going to see this turn around, but certainly not a situation this Colts passing game we want to target. Credit to Rivers for putting up this 371-yard, 3-touchdown performance, but I don't think there's going to be too many more games where we see the Colts face that sort of negative game script early on and then have a corresponding secondary like the Bengals not able to stop it. So PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. So most games with 300 plus passing yards is a rookie in NFL history. Here we go. Andrew Luck with 6, Daniel Jones with 5, Kyler Murray with 5, and then we have Peyton Manning, Warren Moon, and Carson Wentz with 4. And also, after just 6 weeks of action, Joe Burrow already has 4 games with at least 300 yards. I know a lot of this is volume induced. I know being on the same list with Daniel Murray and Carson Wentz isn't necessarily great, but either way, this is showing us, kind of the thought process that why we've been ranking Joe Burrow on this podcast as a QB1 since the offseason. When the teams are throwing the ball around this much, even if the guy isn't impressing us as, just the best quarterback we've seen or anything like that, still a very, very, very viable fantasy option. All right, next matchup here. We got the Falcons beating the Vikings 40-23. Wow. Sorry, everyone. Alexander Mattison did not do what we all expected him to do. Pretty much a unanimous choice across the industry as a top RB1. Just didn't really show up. He had one good run, 16 yards, able to hurdle a guy as he's tending to do. But the true kind of surprise to me was to see Amir Abdullah so involved. And I knew he wasn't active last week, but just offseason reports and things going around about how pleased the coaching staff was with Madison as a pass blocker. Even Gary Kubiak saying this week that he doesn't even view it as a difference between Dalvin Cook and Madison being out there. Surprising to see Abdullah and Mike Boone as involved as they were with these snaps. It was Madison at 46%, Abdullah at 28%, and Mike Boone at 10%. So sounds like Dalvin Cook's going to be back after their week 7 bye, but even if he's not, I'm going to go back to some extent with Madison. He's still going to be a top 12, top 13 RB. But, if you really, really need someone to kind of sign this week and the bye weeks are killing you, I don't think Alexander Mattison is quite locked atop, our top 3-4 handcuffs as we've been talking about him for the whole offseason as I thought he was. So, Tony Pollard, Latavius Murray, Chase Edmonds, I'm still all about these guys. But Madison, unfortunately, because we don't have that, locked in 3-down role with the targets that we thought we did, that Dalvin Cook has. If Madison's not getting that, he slips down to a little bit more of a high-end RB2, borderline RB1, and because of that, he's not exactly a handcuff that I would prioritize to have all around. He's still going to be a starter if Dalvin Cook ever misses time, but it's not a situation like Latavius Murray or Tony Pollard where it's a true league-winning asset, or at least that's what it seems like here, because this Falcons defense, for Kirk Cousins and company to struggle the way they did early on, 3 interceptions, 2 of which were definitely his fault and pretty egregious, not great. And we see the talent here. Justin Jefferson, 9 catches, 166 yards, 2 scores. Adam Thielen had another touchdown. Irv Smith was out there making plays. When there's this much talent in the passing game, and Kirk Cousins, he will put the ball right where he needs to be for large portions of the game. As bad as he was out there, 343 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he mixes the good with the bad. We'll see better days, I think, here moving forward. But, man, 1-5. Need to see something more. And this Vikings defense, we'll get to the PFF Lilly stat, but Vikings defense hasn't been doing them any favors. So, Justin Jefferson, as long as he keeps balling like this right now, PFF's number 1 wide receiver in yards per route run. He needs to be an every week start. Obviously, he already was, but truly every week upside wide receiver 2, despite this offense being more of a run-first unit. And same goes with Adam Thielen. Even though it is a run-first attack, these guys are so locked in as the offense's top 2 receivers, and Cousins is so fine with throwing the ball downfield that they can make the most of their smaller target, smaller raw target volume. Irv Smith is someone that is so good, and he's like Dallas Goedert, where if either Ertz or Kyle Rudolph miss time, we'd be consistently firing these guys up as potentially top 5, top 6 options. As long as Rudolph remains healthy, though, I just can't get behind Irv as a constant option. Cousins threw the ball 36 times in this game, but we've seen more times than not the Vikings. They want to be throwing the ball 20, 25 times per week. When that happens, Irv Smith is one of the first guys to fall down that totem pole. So in situations like this week where he was 2,500 on DraftKings, he was a recommended play there and everything, but just in terms of season long, I think it's going to be tough to expect consistent production from Irv. On the Falcons side of the ball, Matt Ryan, 30 for 40, 371 yards, 4 touchdowns. Funny how getting your, one of the best receivers alive back in action can turn things around for you. Awesome day from Matt Ryan. He had time to throw as well, so Julio back, better offensive line play, nice combo. Calvin Ridley was doing his thing as well. Hayden Hurst had a nice design 35-yard touchdown to pretty much put the dagger in the game. Even Russell Gage was getting back involved with 65 yards after some quiet weeks. So, I get it. Not exactly the toughest matchup, and we've seen the floor with this Falcons team over the past few weeks. But no Dan Quinn there. Guys seem to be, have a little more pep in their step. And Matt Ryan was happy to take advantage of the cozy matchup. And man, Julio freaking weak, everybody. 8 catches for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, the first touchdown was red zone where they were double teaming him, kind of pushed off. But one man's push off is another man's this beastly wide receiver you can't cover. So whatever it was, he found the end zone. Then another time got some yak and just a nice little stiff arm to find his way into the promised land as well. So just all around awesome game from Julio. Calvin Ridley left early with a lower body injury, which is concerning. Before he left, he caught 6 of 7 targets for 61 yards and a score, showing some awesome yards after the catch ability along the way. I know that was kind of a worry with him coming into this year with some of the faders out there, but he was making dudes miss out there. Dude is truly anyone's idea of a polished alpha number 1 wide receiver. The Falcons just so happen to have 2 of those guys continue to fire up Julio and Ridley as borderline top 5 options. Every single week they are available to go. Quickly with the Falcons backfield, Todd Gurley commanded 57% of the offensive snaps, 20 carries, 4 targets. He's just not doing much with the targets. I mean, he caught 3 of them for 20 yards today, but most of that came on a 14-yard chunk. We're still seeing Ito Smith and Brian Hill get pretty involved in the passing game out of this backfield. Didn't see the same sort of efficiency from Gurley on the ground we saw in past weeks, just 47 scoreless yards on those carries. Like we've been saying with Mixon and some of these, guys that disappoint week to week, and David Johnson too. I get it. If you can sell Gurley for someone better, that's great. But again, it's probably not the sexiest guy you can float out there in trade talks. And at the end of the day, there's worse guys to be starting in your lineup than someone that's, looking at 20 touches more games than not. All right, guys, PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. So Mike Zimmer in this offseason before going into the year, they asked him, Danielle Hunter's hurt, Everson Griffin's gone, you got a whole lot of turnover, your entire cornerback room gone. And they asked Mike Zimmer what's going to happen on defense. And his pretty much response was just, I've never coached bad defense before. I don't plan on starting now. And you look at his past years, and he really hasn't since he joined the Vikings in 2014, coached a bad defense. But if we just look at points allowed in their first 6 games of the season since 2014, Zimmer got there. The worst 2 years were in 2014 and 2018. They allowed 143 and 148 points in those first 6 games. In 2020, they've allowed 192 points in the first 6 weeks. So that is a full, nearly 50 points more than the worst season before. Last year in 2019, they allowed just 93 points in the first 6 games of the season. So an additional 99 points have been scored against the Minnesota Vikings in the first 6 games of 2020 compared to 2019. Madness, everybody. Also madness is the fact that all first-time depositors at Monkey Knife Fight that put at least $20 in their account while using promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's a $40 value for just $20, and you'll get the opportunity to turn that $20 into even more money playing daily fantasy and prop games at one of the fastest-growing fantasy sports sites in the USA and Monkey Knife Fight. Go to Monkey Knife Fight and deposit your $20 or promo code PFF today to receive your free PFF Edge annual subscription. All right, everyone, next matchup here. Broncos, Patriots, Drew Lock and company getting the job done. Final score, Broncos 18, Patriots 12. Here's the thing about Drew Lock. I understand there's going to be people out there hating on him. All these people that don't respect the Jeezy rapping savior that the Denver Broncos call their franchise quarterback, they're going to point to the fact that he only completed 10 of 24 passes, or the 2 ill-advised fourth quarter interceptions, or the 19.6 QBR in general, not that great of a performance. Well, here's what I saw from Drew Lock. I saw someone that was gunning the ball downfield from the first snap of the game. He looked like a DGAF god out there. No touchdowns. Who cares? 2 interceptions. This guy was entertaining in an 18-12 game. I have not seen someone make an 18-12 game this entertaining since prime 2019 Jameis Winston, everybody. This was great to see out of Drew Lock from an entertainment perspective. From a fantasy perspective, no, you're not starting Drew Lock anytime soon. Even going back to last year, he's had 1 usable fantasy performance, and as long as, Courtland Sutton, Noah Fant, all his good receivers remain out, it's going to be tough to expect more. And he's also wasn't running the ball today either. So no, he's not a fantasy option, but Drew Lock was fun. I loved it. He's looking like AFC West Jameis Winston, which I am a massive fan of, because watching Jameis and watching Drew Lock on NFL Sundays is good for the soul. With the Broncos as well, sticking on the Denver side of the ball, with Melvin Gordon out, some calling it an illness, some calling it is he's facing suspension because of the DUI. Philip Lindsay took the lead back role, 63% snaps, 23 carries, no targets. Royce Freeman was at 38% snaps, 8 carries, 1 target. That'll work. 101 rushing yards with it. We would like to get some more pass game work in there. Might have just been a situation this week where with Locke only throwing the ball 24 times. That's why the backfield only have 1 target. Lindsay with this sort of role, we can treat him as a borderline RB2. Wouldn't imagine Gordon's going to be missing significant time, but we'll see. Without a Devontae Booker in the midst of things this year, at least it's a 2-back committee with Lindsay and Freeman. The problem in years past was that Booker really made it a 3-way situation. So Freeman, he's the clear number 2. Maybe you can call him the pass down back. Either way, he's not someone on the fantasy radar at the moment. At receiver, Tim Patrick had 4 catches, 101 yards. Didn't look like Stephon Gilmore was really traveling with anyone throughout the game. He was on Patrick for certain reps, and Patrick got the best of him at least once, I believe. So, 41-yard catch down the sideline. Locke was not afraid to chuck the ball deep to him. He did have the most targets on the day, along with Albert. I'm just calling him Albert O. This guy's last name is like 15 letters and incredibly hard. But I believe college teammates with Drew Lock, or they have some sort of connection before. This tight end caught 2 passes for 45 yards. Freaky fast. This dude, when they drafted him, we were talking about the speed they added with Judy Hamler and Albert O out there. So if Noah Fant's going to remain out, we can actually look at Albert O as more of a boomer bust tight end too. Other guys I would want ahead of him, like Darren Fells, but this guy has the sort of speed to make the most out of a minimal target share. Jerry Jeudy, just 2 catches for 32 yards, and nobody else had over 10 yards receiving. So, look, Patrick and Jeudy are going to be the top 2 guys in this passing game more weeks than not. It's not ideal, the situation they're in with an erratic Drew Lock under center, but, there's a lot worse guys out there to be slotting in the starting lineup than a true top 2 option in their passing game. And obviously, this matchup against the Patriots juggernaut secondary wasn't the most ideal spot. All right, now the Cam Newton conversation. This was a very weird game, and I think anyone that watched it would agree with me. Both of his interceptions were on tip passes at the line of scrimmage. And it wasn't like he forced it downfield. They were just more or less tipped at the start and kind of doomed. He took 4 sacks. They were not good. I have no idea how he held on to the first one, just getting blindsided, didn't fumble. Then he did fumble, and, as a FU to all the haters from back in the day when he didn't dive on that potential fumble in the Super Bowl, like Cam somehow dove in the pile with like 4 guys around him and was the one coming out with the ball. So the guy was out there playing his heart out. Ended up racking up 10 carries, 76 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. Helped save the fantasy performance, even though he only had 157 scoreless yards through the air. He also caught a pass for 16 yards from Julian Edelman. So, again, made some huge plays. Got him in a position where they were down, I think, on the Broncos' 30, 35-yard line at the end of the game, trying to find the end zone. Had N'Keal Harry open when the Broncos dialed up a cover 0 blitz. Wasn't quite able to hit him. So, a situation where, we're seeing a little bit of vibes like Lamar Jackson this year, where Cam Newton's not, hitting the outside the number throws as consistently as he's probably like, but also similar to Lamar Jackson, other than 1 or 2 receivers here, it's really hard to say who's been consistently creating separation and all that. There's a reason why Brady ditched town as fast as he did. Didn't exactly leave Cam with an overflowing treasure chest of pass game options. He needs to play better through the air, but again, he's not going anywhere under center in terms of who the starting QB is going to be. And as we'll get into with this PFF Lilly stat, his rushing upside is truly outrageous the way they're using him currently. So backfield remains a bit of a mess. James White, 55% snaps, 4 carries, 9 targets. Rex Burkhead, 32% snaps, 5 carries, no targets. And Damon Harris, just 20% snaps, 6 carries, 1 target. Got kind of game scripted out of here. Look, Cam Newton's the goal line back. And when Sony Michel's back, he's probably going to split reps with Harris too. So either Harris or Sony, if they can have all the early down work in themselves, they're still not really going to be recommended plays because of Cam seeping up the goal line usage and because of Burkhead and White taking the receiving work. White catching 8 passes for 65 yards. I think that's a little more of a situation where it was because the Patriots were playing from behind for so long. But I mean, Julian Edelman, 2 catches, 8 yards into 6 targets. Wouldn't be shocking if James White kind of leads this receiving game the rest of the way. It's not going to be like people were expecting him to kind of have a Christian McCaffrey-esque workload going in this year. Let's not get too ridiculous, but James White could certainly be a nice high floor RB2 moving forward with even 5-6 plus targets per game. This wide receiver room, it's tough to play any of the guys right now. N'Keal Harry didn't even have a catch. Damiere Byrd was able to kind of provide some value on DraftKings with 3 catches, 38 yards at just 3,500, but not a situation in season long. You should be wanting to start any of these guys, and that includes Julian Edelman for the time being. PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. I mentioned this Cam Newton rushing usage is absolutely absurd. So he is on pace this season for 175 carries, 848 yards, and 19 touchdowns on the ground. Just absolutely massive numbers from Cam Newton. The rushing usage remains very well designed. They were doing that throughout the game. He also busted a dope scramble on his own, but Patriots are not afraid to use Cam as a dual threat beast that he is. Continue to slot him in as a fantasy QB1. I know the throwing isn't as smooth as we see throughout the league elsewhere, but when Cam has a bad game like this throwing, and the fact he can get those 76 yards and a touchdown, that's what separates him from the Aaron Rodgers of the world when they have a bad game. So, this was a floor game, and the floor game is still pretty damn good when they're using Cam in this manner. Next game here, we got the Giants at the Washington football team. Not going to spend too much time on this one. Giants took home the win 22-19. Daniel Jones is being used as like a rushing quarterback now. That's Jason Garrett's next idea for how to evolve him, I guess. Completed just 12 of 19 passes for 112 yards. Threw his first touchdown since week 1 to Darius Slayton on a nice 23-yard catch and score. But look, I mean, this passing game has been a train wreck, even in matchups against the Cowboys and Washington football team over the past 2 weeks. Slayton is a little bit banged up. If Sterling Shepard remains out, you can go back to well with Slayton, but otherwise, I don't think we can start anybody in this passing game, and that includes Evan Ingram, who had 2 catches for 30 yards. Devontae Freeman, who I've been a little bit critical of, at this point, he has the workhorse Saquon Barkley role in the offense. Why are the Giants giving Devontae Freeman the Saquon Barkley workhorse role in their offense? I have no idea, but that's the reality we live in. 76% snap rate, 18 carries, 2 targets. As I've been saying here, it's hard to find 20 touchbacks, especially once we look at the Washington side of the ball. And Devontae Freeman, he's going to be in that RB2 territory purely because of volume alone. And to his credit, he actually had a couple really nice runs this game that I hadn't seen from him before. Most of his previous production seemed to be kind of fluky, broken coverage stuff. He didn't even get any kind of work through the air today, but he actually did have some runs. I think I'll put together a nice little all 22 clip and show that he was making some plays. Other side of the ball, Kyle Allen, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, feeding his running backs. As always, the 2 touchdowns were nice. I mean, Logan Thomas and Cam Sims, he put it in the back in the end zone and, gave these guys a chance to catch it, and they did. They were 2-point conversion away from actually scoring the game-winning score and taking home a W, but also had the fumble that the Giants were able to take back to the house and take the lead anyway, and the first half interception was pretty brutal, trying to force the ball to Terry McLaurin. So, backfield, even more of a mess than before. J.D. McKissick, 54% snap rate, 8 carries, 6 targets. Antonio Gibson, 38% snap rate, 9 carries, 5 targets. Peyton Barber getting in there for 4 carries and a target himself. We hope it's going to be when not if Antonio Gibson takes over this true RB1 role. But for right now, they want to keep giving the ball to J.D. McKissick. McKissick isn't playing awful, but you would think devoting the amount of draft capital they did to Gibson, the flashes he's shown so far, he would take over sooner rather than later. We will see. With the receivers, Terry McLaurin caught 7 to 12 targets for 74 yards. Mentioned Cam Sims had a touchdown. We also saw Dontrell Inman have 5 catches, 45 yards. Logan Thomas, it was good to see him get that score again. We can kind of treat him as a touchdown-dependent tight end too, particularly as long as he continues to play every snap. But really, the good news here was Terry McLaurin, and the amount of screens they use him on, the amount of just kind of low A-dot yak stuff. Even though the situation isn't the best, he's playing the sort of role in this offense where we can still expect a decent floor, even though we'd obviously prefer a better QB under center. He's going to continue to be a top 20 option at the position more weeks than not. Our PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. So PFF tracks big time throws and turnover worthy plays. So turnover worthy plays, even if it's not an interception, if it's the defender in a chest, that's a turnover-worthy play. Big-time throw is, just as it sounds, a big-time freaking throw, everyone. So, 1 second. I had to clear my throat for this fantastic stat coming up here. Biggest difference in big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays. So the best quarterbacks with way more big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays over the last 2 seasons. Russell Wilson is plus 46. Aaron Rodgers is plus 33. Tied for third, Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes at plus 19. Now, tied for last out of any quarterback to throw a pass, Kyle Allen and Daniel Jones at minus 13. So we had the 2 quarterbacks in one matchup that have had far more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws over the past 2 seasons. You hate to see it. Quick shout out to our sponsor. If you like fantasy football, you need to be playing on Underdog Fantasy. It's my favorite new fantasy football app. Underdog Fantasy just released an all-new format for their snake drafts. It's called Battle Royale. In Battle Royale, you draft a 1-week team like you normally would, but instead of only competing against the other teams in your specific draft, you compete with teams from other drafts. This way, they pull together the prizes so they can offer big tournament-style payouts while keeping the live snake draft format. So the first Battle Royale, already up on Underdog, $5 to enter, has a $25,000 prize pool and pays out $5,000 to first place. Make your first deposit today and be sure to use my code PFF. After you do, let them know that I sent you. All right, everyone, next game here. Ravens defeated the Eagles 32-28. A game that they were just up a ton early, but the Eagles came clawing their way back. As someone that had the Ravens in multiple money line parlays, I was very pleased to see them get that 2-point conversion stop at the end. Almost a brutal beat there. So Lamar was fine. 186 yards through the air, 1 touchdown. Knee is not a problem. He ran for 108 yards, had a touchdown, 37-yard run up the middle. And even other than that, I mean, he just had multiple plays where he was showing that burst and looking as good as ever. But I just was wondering watching this game, like, what's the difference between this year's Ravens offense and last year's when just nobody could stop them? And one thing I did find that, the Ravens run the pistol formation they've run it, I think, on over 600 snaps over the past 2 years, and nobody else has over 100. It is truly their bread and butter, and nobody else really uses the pistol for any long sort of stretch in the NFL. So last year in 2019, looking at EPA per play, estimated points added per play, just a good per play efficiency metric. In the pistol in 2019, they were at plus 0.16 overall. This year, they're at plus 0.12 overall, so it's not that big of a difference. But if you look at the running out of it, they have dropped a full tenth of a point in estimated points added per run play out of the pistol formation. So they've actually been better throwing out of the pistol this year than last year, but they're no longer just gashing defenses on the run. And I think we've seen that this year, and we saw it in this game. I mean, J.K. Dobbins, 9 carries, 28 yards. Gus Edwards, 14 carries, 26 yards in his score. Mark Ingram, 5 carries and 20 yards before exiting. Look, Lamar, he got going this game on the ground, but previous to that, I just don't think we've seen the same sort of just world-beating rushing game that we saw last year. Because of that, it's made the pass game harder. And, I understand you pass the run. I'm not trying to sit here and say the Ravens, need to run the ball more, but they need to run the ball more effectively, I think, to make their pass game hum like we saw in 2019. So, again, backfield remains just a complete 3-headed mess, expecting Ingram to be back after their bye in all likelihood. With him limited, we saw Gus Edwards actually take the lead with 45% snaps and 14 carries. Dobbins did have the backfield, all 3 of their targets and 40% snaps. Both guys would be somewhat usable without Ingram, but keep an eye on Justice Hill. It would not surprise me if they continue to go 3-headed RB. Just one of those annoying things that we're seeing with Baltimore this year. With the wide receivers, Marquise Brown, 4 catches, 57 yards. Team high, 6 targets. Mark Andrews, just 2 catches, 21 yards. Then to be Nick Boyle, who got the touchdown. Yeah, just a situation where we're going to see better weeks from Hollywood and from Andrews. It's still a condensed target share, just wasn't a good game for them. Particularly disappointing with Andrews, considering how much the Eagles have just been burnt by tight ends throughout this year. But he's still going to be a top 3 guy at the position more weeks than not here moving forward. Other side of the ball with the Eagles, I mean, Wentz would have had a much better day if he had some help from these guys. I mean, John Hightower, his wide receiver, dropped like a 50-yard completion on the first drive of the game. Miles Sanders dropped a potential touchdown. Even Travis Fulgham late in the fourth had a big drop on a fourth and 11 potential conversion. So Wentz ran for 49 more yards and a touchdown, had a 40-yard rush out there. I mean, this guy truly is doing his thing, mobility rise. And we also saw some fun packages with Jalen Hurts out there as well, even doing things where they're lining up next to each other, and both Wentz and Hurts kind of had their hands out like they were going to be the one getting the snap. So they had a double pass out there, and even on the really long 74-yard run Miles Sanders had, Hurts was the guy going in motion on the fake reverse to maybe help draw some attention away. So hopefully we're not moving towards this annoying Jalen Jalen Hurts becomes Taysom Hill 2.0 situation, but you know what? It's working for Philly. And at a minimal, I think he'll at least be a cooler Brad Smith-esque version of that, Taysom Hill kind of slasher Cordell Stewart-esque role. So let's at least, be on Jalen Hurts' side. He's pretty fun to watch out there. He's got some elusiveness, and let's just hope he doesn't go down that Taysom Hill vulture path. With the rest of the squad, Miles Sanders with the injuries, so these snap rates are obviously influenced by that. But without Sanders, playing over 50% of the offensive snaps, we did see Boston Scott go 48% and Corey Clement just 8%. So this was a game that the Eagles were, far behind him. But Corey Clement's, more of a pass down back as it is. So I do think Boston Scott would be flirting with the top 24 ranking next week if Miles Sanders is ultimately ruled out. The question is, is he going to be someone we expect top 12 production from in the same manner of Alexander Madison? And the answer is no. We already saw that in week 1. Was much more of a 50-50 split. I do think it'd be more 60-40 in the favor of Scott, but again, either way, not a situation we can expect a ton of overwhelming production from. With the Eagles receivers, Fulgham got 6 of 10 targets with 75 yards and a score. His touchdown was just lofted up in the double coverage between Peters and Humphrey, and somehow Travis freaking Fulgham was the last one standing with the ball in his hand. So Wentz just trusts this guy. As long as Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson remain out, don't expect that to change. Even once they do get back, man, I think D-Jax will probably take Hightower's field stretching role, but I really don't know if Alshon Jeffrey's corpse is going to be able to overtake Fulgham at this point. The guy is truly playing some good ball, and Wentz trusts him. Elsewhere, Zach Ertz, just 4 catches on 10 targets, long of 11 for 33 yards, and he's now banged up. Just really a lost season from Ertz. You do wonder how much that contract stuff was getting in his head. Also, shout out to AAF Hall of Famer Greg Ward. Had a couple really great catches, and they designed a nice little play for him on the 2-point conversion. PFF Lily stat of the matchup. So I mentioned some of the EPA stuff with the Ravens and Pistol. Also seeing a really big discretion in performance in empty sets. And, one of the things about empty that made the Ravens so good, and it's easy to envision, when they're in empty and they have 5 wide receivers out there, obviously they're not really in empty because Lamar Jackson is such a problem running the football. And last year they were second EPA per play at plus 0.46, only behind the Chiefs in empty formations. This year they are 26 at minus 0.18 estimated points added per play in empty. So that is truly a difference of over 0.6 estimated points average per play. I think coming out of the bye into week 8, we will hopefully see the Ravens get their stuff together a little bit more on some of these, base just principles of their offense. Next matchup here, everybody. We got the Bears and the Panthers. Chicago took home a 23-16 win. It wasn't really a game where they had to put their foot on the gas at all, particularly in terms of offense. When Khalil Mack and company are playing as well as they were, just didn't need to see too much from Nick Foles. He did throw a nice touchdown to Cole Kmet early, but 198 yards on 39 pass attempts. He got A-Rob his 5 catches for 53 yards, and nobody else had even 40 receiving yards. So, Darnell Mooney, he's going to be, I think, the number 2 pass game option more weeks than not. Jimmy Graham had 8 targets, 5 catches, 34 yards, but just realize kind of the Bears' path to victory. They're trying to control the clock. They're going to keep giving David Montgomery 20-plus touches, and they're going to ask Nick Foles not to lose the game for them. That was more than enough to get the win today. Speaking of Montgomery, 84% snaps, 19 carries, 4 targets, had 58 rushing yards, 39 receiving yards. He looked fine enough out there. Unfortunately, just brutal stretch for the fantasy managers out there. Has a run down the 1-yard line, stopped just short, gets 2 tries, doesn't score on either. They said he scored on one of them, and they ruled him down, and then Nick Foles took the touchdown for himself on a QB sneak. So, annoying everyone. I get it. Carolina Panthers matchup. This was supposed to be the boom spot for Montgomery, but this usage is pretty great. And, on a week where it seems like every running back that, had 20-plus touches didn't give us the kind of big game we were hoping for other than Derrick Henry, at least we can take solace in the fact that Montgomery, with those 4 catches for 39 yards, does have a newfound floor for games where he's not going to find the end zone. So not a ton from the Bears offense in this one. We did see a surprising amount of promise, I think, from the Panthers, despite this 16-point effort. Teddy Bridgewater was not good. It was a tough matchup, though, let's be honest. 216 yards, 2 picks, had a 3rd pick that was returned for a touchdown but nullified by a penalty, and took 4 sacks. Solid the rushing floor, though, still coming out there for Teddy. 48 rushing yards, was able to compliment Mike Davis, who had 52 yards and a touchdown, 18 carries. But, yeah, Bridgewater, ultimately, threw the pick to end the game, wasn't able to get him in the end zone, but some of the throws he was making to DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson down the sideline, I mean, these were not easy at all, and a lot of it has been easy in this Panthers offense with Joe Brady scheming out some goodness throughout the year, but Robbie Anderson had a diving catch down the sideline, then a nice contested kind of back shoulder fade out of the slot. DJ Moore had a great catch down the sideline, almost came down with these two one-handers, but wasn't quite able to. Ultimately, DJ was the wide receiver one this day with 11 targets, Robbie only 5. They combined for 170 yards, though, and 9 catches. It's these two at the top, and that is fine, everybody, because when it's this condensed and that target share and a good offense that I continue to think is ascending despite this step back, we can definitely live with that in fantasy football land. Mike Davis, was a disappointing game. He did get the rushing touchdown, but just 2 catches for 3 yards. Talked about this all week where Mike Davis really isn't quite as featured as a pass game option as McCaffrey. They're using him more as a third, fourth read, true check down option. I do think he's going to be completely out of the picture once McCaffrey is back. Fully expecting McCaffrey to have that 90% role. But, as we were talking about with Alexander Mattison not being the kind of 3-down handcuff we thought he was, Mike Davis most certainly is. So, do not be cutting Mike Davis once Christian McCaffrey is back if you can find the extra bench room. PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. I mentioned this before where it's not a situation where it's Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore. It's Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. Right now, Robbie is tied for 5th with Calvin Ridley at 52 targets, and DJ Moore is tied for 9th with Tyler Boyd and Keenan Allen at 47. So only a 5 target difference between these two guys on the year. Robbie's had a little bit more kind of lower ADOT, more consistent work, which is surprising, but DJ Moore then has the higher upside with some of the more deeper targets. So keep going back to well with not just Robbie, but both Robbie and DJ Moore. Next matchup here. Thank you for keeping along, everyone. We just have 4 more to get through. Always appreciate you guys staying with me. Lions beat the Jaguars 34-16. Pretty boring one out here. Lions got up and were able to kind of coast and take home the win. But don't be deceived by this Matt Stafford. Pretty underwhelming stat line. 19 for 31. 223 yards and just 1 score. But, DeAndre Swift and Adrian Peterson are siphoning away 3 touchdowns inside a 10-yard line. Not hard to imagine a world where Stafford ends up converting those in a different game. So we continue to see the deep ball be utilized at a higher rate. We'll get into that more specifically later. But yeah, so the big story from this Lions offense, though, was DeAndre Swift. Had 14 carries for 116 yards, 2 touchdowns, also chipped in 3 catches for 7 yards through the air. Problem is, everyone, this is a 4-back backfield as it's been all season. Adrian Peterson was at 39% snaps, Swift 37%, Jamal Agnew 23%, and Kerryon Johnson 20%. He had 4 carries himself. AP converted his 15 carries into 40 yards in a short goal line touchdown. Clearly, they're going to use their second-round pick now in their offense. Great. It's incredible. It took us this long to get there. And coming out of the bye, this was a little bit predictable. With that said, look, Swift, we still want a bigger role than this. He's flex-worthy with 10 to 15 touches per game, but this was still a matchup against the Jaguars. Atrocious defense already and even banged up. And we saw what Joe Mixon and some other guys that haven't been able to get much going in other matchups, what they were able to do against the Jaguars. So I'm not going to freak out and rank Swift as a top 20 running back, particularly as long as, Adrian Peterson remains the weekly favorite to lead the way in snaps and touches. But at a minimum, Swift is well ahead of Kerryon now, and we can work with someone that's at least getting 10 touches per game, particularly if he continues to look as good as Swift. The 54-yard run was pretty much him just kind of getting through there, but saw some better runs in the second half where he was actually forced to take on contact and try to break some tackles and do things of that nature, and he did start to impress. So I don't take anything away from the performance, but I just know that this is one of those situations where while the workload changed, it wasn't an overwhelming shift in action. It's good that Swift, kind of has this Antonio Gibson opportunity now where they're actually going to give him a good amount of touches per week. But like Antonio Gibson, still hardly, a clear pathway to that featured RB1 role. With the Jaguars, Gardner Minshew, 243 yards, touchdown and a pick, just 25 for 44 passing. Didn't get a lot of help out there. This dude doesn't exactly have the strongest arm out there, but he was really letting it fly. And Keelan Cole and DJ Chark each had a deep one that just were not able to get down. DJ Chark especially, I'm going to take a look at some of the receivers from this past week just had the largest difference in air yards versus actual receiving yards. I would not be surprised if Chark is at the top of that list. I mean, they were looking for him deep a lot, just weren't able to get on the same page. So, I know this wasn't a tough matchup, but I love the idea of a bounce back DJ Chark week here in week 7, and the Jaguars should be able to keep the offense moving. I mean, Minshew is just able to do his thing out there against pretty much any defense. I know the ceiling isn't super high, but he's got that rushing floor, and he was able to score, I believe, his first career rushing touchdown in this game. So 14 yards on the ground. James Robinson was able to kind of salvage the day with a reception touchdown late. That is in his range of outcomes, which is awesome. Chris Thompson doesn't just steal all that work. As the snaps ended up, James Robinson was at 69%, 12 carries, 4 targets, and Chris Thompson just 3 targets on a 31% snap rate. So, James RB1 season and maybe more RB2 season, more weeks than not, just in this Jaguars offense. But still a guy, that's threatening 15 plus touches with this sort of pass down role. He's going to be in your starting lineups every single week. With these wide receivers, Keelan Cole, big game, 6 catches, 143 yards, had a nice 51-yarder where he was breaking some tackles. Kenny Galladay on the other side of the ball also went off for over 105 yards. He had this wild 48-yard catch where he climbed the ladder. Looks 100% healthy after battling from some lower body injuries to start the year. Nobody else on Detroit managed even, more than 35 receiving yards. TJ Hawkinson did get the touchdown on the goal line. Marvin Jones, unfortunately, couldn't get anything going on. No one on the Jaguars other than Cole surpassed 50 yards. So I think we'll see better days to come from some of these complementary options, but it's a good reminder that in Detroit, it's Kenny Galladay's world. We're all living in it. In Jacksonville, it's a little bit more, changed up week to week. I mean, Laviska Shenault was someone that had just been catching more and more passes every single game. Unfortunately, held just to 3 catches, 10 yards, and only had 1 carry in this performance. So we know when everyone's healthy in Jacksonville, it's kind of hard to figure out who's going to be the target leader in a given week. It was DJ Chark with 14. Again, I think he'll be the alpha more times than not. But with Keelan and Laviska and any of the tight ends, I think it's going to be tough to expect consistent fantasy value from anyone there. PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. Yeah, so Matthew Stafford. I've just seen some stuff where people are still kind of talking down on his aggressiveness because of his raw numbers, but you go behind the scenes a little bit, and his average target depth by week just keeps on keeping on ever since Kenny Galladay got back. So week 1, it was at just 9.3 yards. Week 2, 8.8. And for reference, he had a league high double-digit ADOT in 2019. That was one of the main reasons why he was so successful as a fantasy asset. Once Kenny Galladay got back, though, we saw it go from, again, 9.3 and 8.8 up to 10.2 in week 3, 13.3 in week 4, and then 11.3 here in week 6. So upcoming matchups against the Falcons, Colts, Vikings, Washington football team, Panthers, and Texans keep going back to the well with Stafford and this Lions passing game. One more quick shout out to our sponsor before we get to these final 3 matchups. PristineAuction.com. Check out their daily auctions with $1 starting bids on over 8,000 football items up for auction. Pristine Auction guarantees authenticity on every product. Use code PFF for $10 off your first invoice. We are currently giving away a signed Amari Cooper jersey through PristineAuction.com. So rate and review the podcast. We will be sure to choose a winner next week. So go get you that Amari Cooper signed jersey. All right, this last 3 matchups won't take too much time on this one. Dolphins beat down the Jets 24-0. Ryan Fitzmagic revenge game went well, 191 yards, 3 touchdowns. Looked like he was about to just have a monster game. Ended up throwing 2 picks. Seemed like he got a little overzealous out there with the way things were going early on. Didn't chip in much on the rushing yards, so didn't give everyone the true boom performance that we were hoping for. One of these games where again, he only threw 27 passes. His top 3 games this season. Hasn't had to throw more than 30 passes. So that's why, Adam Shaheen was the leading receiver with 3 catches, 51 yards, and just 1 score. Devontae Parker was the only guy on the Dolphins with more than 5 targets. He finished with 8 targets, 3 catches, 35 scoreless yards. It's a situation with the Dolphins where so many guys are getting the ball and being spread out. Tight end position, Shaheen had 3 targets. Freaking Durham Smythe had 2 targets. Mike Gesicki couldn't even catch a ball and only 2 targets. Preston Williams caught 2 of his 3 targets. One of them went for a score. Even Jakeem Grant was getting there with 4 catches on his own. So other than Devontae Parker, there's just too many snaps and targets getting intermixed in this Miami receiving core. Even Mike Gesicki at this point, we probably need to treat as more of a boomer bust tight end 2 than consistent reliable option. because he doesn't play tight end in his own offense. He plays slot receiver. And even though we were seeing, a situation where Isaiah Ford wasn't even involved, I got to even check if he was active out there. But with Jakeem Grant being that much more involved than Gesicki among these wide receivers, you'd hope the talent would win out at some point, but it's certainly not the early season situation where it looked like Gesicki was going to be, this offensive version of Eric Decker, if you kind of go back to what Chan Gailey was doing with him and Brandon Marshall back in those Jets years. So in the backfield, though, this was really promising. Myles Gaskin, 70% snaps, 18 carries, 4 targets, with Jordan Howard once again inactive. Matt Breida, 29% snaps, 6 carries, 2 targets, and Patrick Laird chipped in 11%. So Gaskin didn't get the goal line touches, but he is right up there now, atop the league leaderboard, or pretty close to it in total combined carries and targets this season. So better days ahead for Myles Gaskin. They like the guy, and he is getting legit RB1 usage. Other side of the ball, Joe Flacco took a 28-yard sack. That was every bit as funny as you would think. 186 yards on 44 pass attempts, fed Jamison Crowder 13 targets. He caught 7 of them for 48 yards. Gotta love PPR. Does it represent, actual real life goodness? No, but we adjust accordingly, and that's what makes Jamison Crowder a weekly wide receiver 1 option. Also, shout out Rashad Perryman, 4 catches, 62 yards. Probably could have had over 100 yards with some better quarterback play, but such is life in New York under Coach Gase. With the backfield, Le'Veon Bell not being there. LaMichael Pirine, 57% snaps, 7 carries, 3 targets. Of course, Frank Gore was still there with 36%, 11 carries and 4 targets. And Ty Johnson was actually the one providing most of the juice with a nice little 34-yard run. But we've already talked entirely too much about the New York Jets offense. Let's get on to the PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. So, I was mentioning Gaskin's just monstrous role. So here are the top running backs this year and just combined carries and targets. We got in first place, Joe Mixon. Second place, Derrick Henry. Then we got Josh Jacobs, Ronald Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, and sitting clean in 7th place is Myles Gaskin with 111 combined carries and targets through 6 weeks. I didn't see it coming. You didn't see it coming, but we need to adjust. And truly, as long as Jordan Howard is staying inactive, treat Gaskin as, a borderline RB1. He has the early down, pass down, and goal line back role in his offense. That's very rare to find. We need to exploit that. All right, second to last matchup here. Buccaneers blew out the Packers 38-10. This was a game where Rodgers, he goes down. He's looking great, as he has all season long. Finds his way into the end zone. He gives him a McCringleberry tribute from Key and Peele. The old double pump is fine. Triple pump will get you a flag celebration. Amazing. Touchdown got overturned, and from there on, it was like, what is going on? Matchup against the Buccaneers defense that, did have Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean making some great plays out there. Didn't help, but 2 picks from Rodgers, including a pick 6, 4 sacks, just 16 of 35, 160 scoreless yards. Easily his worst game of the season. Again, going into this game, couldn't stress enough how Rodgers was not only having a bounce back year, but he was having a career best season. PFF did determine that he did face the NFL's easiest opening stretch of schedules. It makes sense that there was going to be a down performance at some point, but we should still expect a little bit better days ahead for Rodgers in this passing game. I think this was clearly the floor game, and we'll see. We'll see them come back, once they get into some of these NFC North matchups, not against the Bears potentially. But it was good to see Devontae Adams back in action, looking healthy. He caught 6 of 10 targets for 61 scoreless yards. Nobody else finished over 35. The Aaron Jones usage continued to be annoying. He played 57% snaps, 10 carries, 5 targets. Jamal Williams was right there. There at 51% snaps, 4 carries and a target. A.J. Dillon a little more involved than we've seen in the past with 5 carries and 31 targets. Might be a good idea to do a study one of these days on rookie RB usage post-bye, because we did see Dillon and Swift pop up, so we'll need to keep that in mind throughout the rest of the season. Looking at you, J.K. Dobbins in week 8 potentially. So again, just a complete down game from the Packers. I wouldn't put too much stock into a lot of this. We did learn that Aaron Rodgers is calling Robert Tonyan Bobby, and they asked Tonyan if he has ever been called that nickname by anyone else, and he said no. But, Aaron Rodgers can call him whatever he wants. So that's the type of attitude we want to hear. Usually with Rodgers and his receivers, it's always just been a matter of, finding someone that he likes personally, as well as, chemistry-wise out there on the field. So Tonyan still is one of those guys, even though just 3 catches, 25 yards in this performance. I still think he's a weekly tight end 1. Obviously, Devontae isn't going anywhere from the top of that. And with Aaron Jones, 10 carries, 15 yards in the score. Had 3 catches for 26 yards. We saw them try to really get him involved as a receiver. He's still going to be a weekly top 10 option at the position, although it's unfortunate they don't use him to the true best extent of his abilities. Brady was really, out there screaming early, and defense responded for him. They got a pick six on Rodgers and then set him up for a short touchdown from like the 3-yard line. Credit to Brady, though. He made some great throws out there along the way after that. Only 166 yards and 2 scores and 27 attempts, but it is worth mentioning. I think they said there was like 35-mile-per-hour winds at some point out there, and you would think that rain would be, what would kind of discourage passing, but it's actually wind that, historically has been most problematic for passing offenses. So Brady really had some dimes to Rob Gronkowski. Gronk went out there, 5 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown on a team high, 8 targets. Godwin, 5 catches, 48 yards on 7 targets. Mike Evans, just 1 catch, 10 yards on 2 targets. I mean, this is one of the things that Bruce Arians said in the offseason that was confusing about Evans, where they asked him, going from Jameis to Brady, new style quarterback, probably not as much vertical downfield passing. And they asked Arians if he planned on changing Evans' role because he's, mostly running vertical-minded routes. Arians said, no, we think he's best doing that. We want to continue to use our guys to the best of their abilities. That's fine, and we'll see big games from Evans, but he unfortunately has this kind of low floor as long as that's what we're going to do, because this Godwin that's getting all the underneath stuff, getting all the screens, getting that easy, yak ability. And Godwin, hey, he's better after the catch. Like, he deserves to have that. But, the way they're kind of splitting this up between the two, and then we got, Tyler Johnson and the running back stealing away some targets as well. Just not exactly, the type of high floor we were hoping for with Evans and Brady, considering some of the early season chemistry they were considering. I think Evans is probably going to be more of an upside wide receiver 2, Godwin borderline wide receiver 1 when these guys are healthy together. With Gronk playing better, and look, he really wasn't separated on any of these, but you know what? Him and Brady have been throwing the ball together so long, they can probably do it blindfolded by this point. As long as Gronk is out there getting these sort of targets and Brady's throwing the ball as well as he was, he's going to be in that kind of high-end tight end 2 touchdown dependent conversation. So I don't think he's going to be scoring every week, and he had a pretty weak Gronk spike out there doing it left-handed for some reason, but it was good to see that the guy is at least not as washed as he kind of looked in the first few weeks of the season. Another big game for Ronald Jones. Leonard Fournette was supposed to be active in emergency only. He ended up not being active at all. We saw LaShawn McCoy back out there doing nothing, but Ronald Jones, guys, continuing to do his thing on the ground. 23 carries, 113 yards, 2 scores. I get it. He's not anything as a receiver, but this takes us right into our PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. We got to put some respect on Rojo as a rusher. Career best, 81.7 PFF rushing grade. Career high 0.2 missed forced tackles per attempt. Everything's a career high this year. 4.9 yards per carry. He was at 4.3 last season. 3.5 yards after contact per attempt. He was at just 3 last season. No fumbles all year. I get it. He does have 4 drops, but the man is running well. He's getting all sorts of touches, and he's making the most of it. So even when Leonard Fournette comes back, I assume he'll eat into this to some extent, but it does seem like we're approaching the point where we can, confidently be looking at Rojo as someone that's going to be getting 15 to 20 touches on a pretty certain basis. So if Leonard Fournette status doesn't really change, we can legit be treating Rojo as an RB1 in this blossoming Buccaneers offense. Last matchup I want to go over. Thank you all for sticking with me here on the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. 49ers defeated the Rams in the Sunday night game 24-16. Jared Goff was kind of his usual self out there, I thought. He made some great throws, notably Josh Reynolds hooking up for a 40-yard touchdown where Goff kind of finally uncorked one and kind of gave his guy a contested chance downfield. Other than that, just didn't see a whole bunch of big-time throws. The touchdown to Robert Woods was fantastic. I don't know how he even saw the window to get it to him in the back of the end zone, but missed some opportunities to Cooper Kupp. Kupp didn't exactly help at all with a touchdown drop. And they just had some miscommunication down the field. Just wasn't the best game. And to see Goff actually throw the ball 38 times and only finish with 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. The problem for him this year has been volume. So for him to get the volume and then not really respond, a little bit disappointing to see. But I think we, if he's going to come out and have this better volume moving forward, then he could have some better days with the improved efficiency that he's been showing all season. Problem is that more weeks than not, they do want to run the ball. And tonight they want to run the ball with Darrell Henderson. 14 carries, 88 yards. I'm pulling up the snaps right now. They weren't up when I started this podcast, but my goodness, I mean, he is just going out there and he's taking over. And Sean McVay was talking before or after last week about Cam Akers would be more involved. But, as we talked about in this podcast, he's really been saying all season that, as much as, if one guy gets the hot hand is going to be involved, still going to be kind of a week-to-week approach with how they're going to be doing things. So, Henderson, guess what? He's been the best back in here more weeks than not. I believe it's 2, 4, 5, and 6 is the counter for Darrell Henderson weeks at this point. It's still going to be a little annoying, and we still saw Malcolm Brown out there getting his opportunities as well. But as long as Henderson remains the best back, I think he's going to be getting opportunities more times than not. And overall on the day, Darrell Henderson had 30 snaps. Cam Akers just 1 snap on the night. So a situation where, again, we did still have Malcolm Brown out there stealing away some snaps for himself. But I think moving forward, we can start to treat Henderson a little bit as the lead guy. I mean, okay, Malcolm Brown, I'm seeing it now, 26 snaps. So still a situation where Henderson's only going to come out a little bit above 50%. But 14 carries, 88 yards. Brown only had 2 carries, and we also saw Henderson, not really not used behind Cam Akers in the receiving game, at least. Unfortunately, Brown did have the 4 backfield targets, so the more I look at the, touch distribution and the snaps as I'm talking this out with you guys right now, it's starting to seem a little bit flukier than I guess it seemed in real time. But, having someone like Henderson, he's got the highest floor at least right now, because we've now seen Malcolm Brown take a back seat enough weeks in a row, and he's not getting more than 5 targets in these floor games. So Henderson's the one that we can actually start. Cam Akers and Brown, we're not going to be able to. Whether or not we can treat Henderson as a consistent top 20 option, that remains to be seen. I'd be curious what McVay has to say about not using Akers at all in this one in post game, but Henderson, as long as he keeps playing well, he should continue to get this role, even though if it's not as safe as we would want it to be. Other side of the ball, Jimmy Garoppolo, 3 touchdowns all in the first half, 3 pretty easy ones. He got Kittle on a slant that he was able to take the distance on a cover 0. Had to put the ball, where it needed to be under some duress a little bit, but Kittle did the rest. Deebo Samuel, a little pop pass for a touchdown, also had a long 35-yarder on, I believe, the first play of the game where it looked like he was down, but showed some nice balance to stay up. And then Brandon Ayuk had a short receiving score as well. So, made life easy out there for Jimmy. He looked healthier. They were showing his feet a lot in the pocket, and it seemed like he was doing a better job than he was last week. But, it's the Kyle Shanahan show. He's going to do this with his quarterback more times than not, and that's why we love George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk in Fantasyland. Knowing that Garoppolo is in this healthier state, though, we can truly start going back to Deebo and to a lesser extent Ayuk as every week fantasy options. Deebo's snaps were pretty cut in his first game back, but now we've had 2 weeks in a row of seeing him as a full-time player. He is truly one of their best playmakers out there. They're getting rush attempts on a pretty weekly basis. I'm fine treating Deebo as, a borderline wide receiver 2 here moving forward. Ayuk's going to be more of a boom or bust wide receiver 3, but he's shown enough kind of just solid ability out there to warrant a roster spot. And then Kittle, 7 catches, 109 yards, and a score. Number 2 tight end in fantasy football behind only Travis Kelce. Real quick with this 49ers backfield, Raheem Mostert, 17 carries, 65 yards before departing. We saw JaMychal Hasty come in, 9 carries, 37 yards. McKinnon was at 6 for 18. So it's a mess here right now. I mean, not even a guarantee that McKinnon necessarily gets that featured role back that he had while Mostert was out the first time. Jeff Wilson, we're assuming, could be back in the future after he was inactive this game with a calf injury. I mean, wouldn't even be shocking if they decide to go dip in and pick someone else out. So I would say if Mostert's out next week, we can treat McKinnon as a top 24 back, but like a lot of these cases, going to be tough to squeeze him into that top 10. All right, everyone, that is going to do it. Thank you for sticking with me here on the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, these are coming out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I also have plenty of articles out throughout the week. You can find everything I'm sending out on a weekly basis on my Twitter, @IHartitz. Thank you all for listening. As always, truly can't tell you enough how much I appreciate the support. Hope everyone had a fun, profitable week 6, and let's go win some more money week 7. So until next time, take care, everybody.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel, from PFF.